They say home is where the heart is. For me, home was a small duplex tucked behind a dentist's office and an overgrown lot where someone promised to build condos 6 years ago. It wasn't pretty, and it definitely wasn't quiet, especially not on Thursdays when the high school marching band practiced half a block away, but it was mine. I'd been renting that place for just shy of 10 years, never missed a payment, even mowed the little strip of lawn nobody ever asked me to touch. Mr. Langston, my landlord, was one of those old-school guys who believed in firm handshakes, early rent checks, and fixing things himself with too much duct tape and a suspicious-can-labeled roof sealant. We got along fine. And then he died. It wasn't sudden, but it wasn't expected either. A stroke, his niece told me. I brought flowers to the funeral and sat in the back next to his barber. Thought that was the respectful thing to do. Didn't know he had any family, really, aside from the niece who popped up out of nowhere. Turns out he had a nephew too, Brett. Now, I don't know how to explain Brett without sounding like I'm inventing a stereotype. Imagine a guy who grew up thinking being a manager at a vape shop was beneath him but still manages one anyway just for now. He shows up in a Patagonia vest, hair slicked back like he's a finance bro stuck in a town with no skyscrapers and starts calling the shots like he owns the place. Which technically he did. Mr. Langston left him the duplex in his will. That part I didn't have beef with. What hit me in the teeth was what came next. It was a Tuesday. I just finished my route delivering mail in Tennessee heat that turns your socks into tea bags, and I walked up to my front door to find a piece of paper taped right to the middle. Crooked and bold in that overly professional font people use when they want to sound legal but don't know the law. You are hereby notified that your tenancy is terminated effective 30 days from the date of this notice pursuant to Tennessee Code and Section 66-28-505. Property will undergo renovation. All belongings must be removed by insert date. Brett. I stood there rereading it like it might make more sense the second time. No greeting, no warning. Just get out. Like I was a guest who overstayed his welcome. My hands actually started shaking, half from anger, half from disbelief. You live somewhere for a decade, keep the place clean, fix your own leaky faucet without complaining, and someone comes along with a smug signature and decides your life's gotta go in a cardboard box. I called him that evening. Thought maybe I could talk to him, find a compromise. Brett picked up on speaker, probably mid-sip of something overpriced. Hey, Jamal, yeah, I saw your name on the notice. I'm really sorry, man, but I gotta think long-term here, you know? No. I didn't know. But I let him talk. He said the magic words, it's nothing personal. That's when I knew it was personal. Because only someone who's never worked a real job a day in his life thinks evicting a person from their home isn't personal. I hung up and sat in the dark, the hum of the fridge louder than usual, trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do. 30 days to pack up a decade. 30 days to find another affordable place in a town where every developer had a hard-on for faux industrial apartments and $2,000 coffee bars. And as I stared at the notice again, lit up in the kitchen light like it was smirking, something started forming at the base of my spine. Not quite rage. Not yet. Just a seed of something colder. Because what Brett didn't know, and what I didn't even know yet, is that he'd just started a game he was never going to win. You can tell a lot about a man by the way he parks his car. Brett parked diagonally. Every time. Like the rules didn't apply to him. Like he deserved an extra foot of asphalt because the universe owed him space. The first time I saw his truck in my old driveway, chrome rims, dealer plates still on, I knew exactly the kind of guy I was dealing with. The kind who calls himself a property investor because he inherited one house and watches YouTube videos about passive income. I'd been driving by my old place on my mail route. Couldn't help it. Old habits and muscle memory. I slowed down when I saw the for rent sign already in the yard just 5 days after I got the eviction notice. Renovations, my ass. A couple was touring the unit with him that morning. Mid-20s, matching Patagonia vests like a cult uniform, pointing at the front windows and saying things like quaint and perfect for our lifestyle. I watched from across the street as Brett waved his arms around like a magician revealing his latest trick. He even clapped once. Clapped. Like he was selling beachfront property and not a one-bedroom with creaky floors and a rust stain in the tub that predates Wi-Fi. I leaned on my postal truck and just watched. That same duplex where I'd spent the last decade, birthday dinners, snow days, Sunday naps, now a stage for some grinning puppet flipping charm like pancakes. He spotted me across the street, gave me a lazy two-finger wave like we were buddies and not landlord and former tenant. Then he went right back to his tour, talking loud enough for me to hear him say, "I'm super hands-on with all my tenants." I had to laugh. Not a real laugh, one of those bitter, tight-lipped exhale-through-your-nose laughs. Hands-on? Brett couldn't tell you where the breaker box was if you strapped a flashlight to his head and spun him in a circle. But I didn't march over. I didn't yell. I didn't even spit on the sidewalk, though God knows I wanted to. No. I got back in my truck, clicked my seatbelt, and drove off. That night, I unpacked my life into a sublet room the size of a walk-in closet. The new place was technically in a house, but the only thing shared about it was the noise. One roommate played EDM at 2 a.m., the other stored raw chicken on the top fridge shelf, uncovered. Every time I opened that fridge, it was like playing Russian roulette with salmonella. Still, I kept my head down, paid rent on time, went to work, came home, and every day I passed my old place. Saw Brett's truck out front. Sometimes different people inside. Lights on late. Once I saw him out back with a can of spray paint trying to cover up the rust spots on the AC unit like that was going to fool anyone. That's when I started feeling it. That slow burn heat in my gut. Not a fire, not yet, but a pilot light turning on. Because you can only be pushed so far before something inside you flips. And for me, that flip happened when I found out he'd raised the rent on the new tenants. From $750 to $1,500. Double. For the exact same place. No renovations. Just a different coat of paint, a cheap IKEA shelf in the hallway, and a new coat of bullshit. That's when I realized this wasn't just personal. It was patterned. And lucky for me, I already knew a pattern when I saw one. Because I'd been delivering his mail. And Brett? Brett had been sloppy. Really sloppy. The kind of sloppy that makes revenge feel not only good, but earned. Moving out of your home after nearly a decade is a lot like packing up a failed marriage, except instead of splitting the assets, you're begging your buddies to help you fit your life into the back of a borrowed pickup. My place was small, but it held a quiet kind of history. The dent in the wall behind the door from that time I tripped carrying groceries. The scratch marks on the kitchen counter from the cat I fostered for one reckless summer. The ceiling stain shaped like West Virginia. None of it was pretty. But it was mine. Or had been. By week 3 of my countdown, I was living out of boxes. I had stopped pretending there'd be a last-minute miracle. Brett wasn't budging. Every time I texted, I got some version of per lease terms blah blah and thanks for your understanding. No empathy. No guilt. Just breezy corporate detachment like I was a line item on a spreadsheet, not a human being with roots in his goddamn property. I couldn't find anything decent in my price range. Everything under $1,200 was either a scam, a shoebox, or a converted garage being passed off as cozy. I ended up taking a sublet from a college junior who was studying abroad. The Craigslist ad said chill vibes only, which should have been my first red flag. By the time I moved in, my room smelled like weed, ramen, and something vaguely wet. There were 4 dishes in the sink, each bearing a different mold ecosystem. The shared bathroom had a towel rod that doubled as a chin-up bar, judging by the broken drywall. I stacked my boxes against the wall and sat on the bed, which made a sound like an old man sighing, and just stared at the ceiling. It was low. Real low. The kind of ceiling you start to feel pressing down on you after a few days, like life itself is saying you don't belong here. I was angry. But not the kind of hot, reckless anger that makes you punch holes in walls or fire off bad texts. This was the slow, bitter kind. The kind that simmers. That grows teeth. That whispers to you at 3 a.m. You know things, Jamal. You've seen things. Maybe it's time he saw what that meant. See, in my job, people forget you exist. They don't realize how much you pick up as a mail carrier. Patterns. Names. Movements. When people stop getting bank statements and start getting legal notices. When a house starts getting junk mail that doesn't match the name on the lease. And Brett? Brett was a sloppy little bastard. I'd noticed something even before I moved out. The mail for him still came to the duplex. No forwarding address. No P.O. box. Just stacks of stuff piling up for Brett Langford in the very house he now rented out. Which technically meant it still came to my route. And by postal policy, unless the tenant requested a forward, that mail stayed in my loop. Now, I want to be clear, I never opened anything. That's a felony. But I didn't need to. The envelopes told me plenty. Bank logos. Credit offers. a piece from the IRS, one envelope from what looked like a property management service out in Murfreesboro, and a lot of his mail had pre-approved printed on the front. That's when the idea really took shape. I didn't want to ruin Brett's life. I wanted him to ruin it himself. All I had to do was help shine a little light on what was already festering in the dark. And thanks to Brett's arrogance and poor paper trail, I had the perfect front row seat to do it. Let the games begin. People talk a lot about privacy these days. Data breaches, smart speakers, targeted ads. But they forget something simple. If you really want to know how a person lives, follow their mail. Every envelope tells a story. A pre-approval from Capital One? That's someone looking to float spending. A student loan servicer? Someone under 30, probably still trying to breathe. But Brett's mail? It painted a picture I don't think even he realized he was creating. Or maybe he thought no one was watching. That's the thing about entitled people. They assume the world revolves around them and that nobody notices the mess they leave behind. But I did. By month 2 of being in that godforsaken sublet where one roommate turned the hallway into a bike repair shop and the other treated deodorant like an optional philosophy, I'd started collecting. Not stealing. Not opening. Just gathering what was mine to handle. Mail for Brett Langford sent to an address where Brett no longer lived. Technically, under USPS regulations, mail that arrives for a non-forwarded individual at an address is considered undeliverable as addressed. It's supposed to be returned. But as a carrier, if that individual owns the property and didn't set up forwarding, it's a gray area. Not illegal to hold it. Not illegal to read what's on the outside. And I made damn sure I stayed clean. What I found wasn't just junk. It was a paper trail with all the subtlety of a neon sign. Brett had applied for at least 3 different business credit cards, all listing his rental business as a commercial venture. A few envelopes had bank logos with return addresses in Delaware, Shell Corp Central. And then came the rebate cards. I recognized them instantly. They were those preloaded Visa cards companies send out after you spend a certain amount. That meant Brett was racking up expenses somewhere. Probably renovation purchases he could write off. If he were smart, that is. But Brett wasn't smart. He was greedy. And greed makes people lazy. One day I got a letter from the IRS with his name on it, marked Important Tax Document. I didn't touch it. Just stared at it sitting there, knowing that somewhere in a folder in some government building was Brett's pathetic little financial Jenga tower just waiting to get nudged. Then came the kicker, an envelope from a real estate group in Nashville. Addressed to Brett Langford, Investor Tier. Investor Tier? I laughed so hard I had to sit on the back bumper of my truck. This guy wasn't just playing landlord. He thought he was building a damn empire. And that's when I started to put together the plan. See, Brett wasn't just renting illegally high. He wasn't just stiffing tenants on repairs. He was likely, very likely, not reporting a good chunk of his income. Which meant the IRS would care. So would the housing board. And if I played my cards right, so would every tenant with a leaky pipe and an overdrawn bank account. But I didn't want to go off half-cocked. That's what people like Brett expect when they screw someone over, that they'll scream, post angry Yelp reviews, maybe even key a car. But I'd waited tables. I'd worked graveyard shifts. I'd walked 11 miles a day in the heat with dogs chasing my calves and toddlers flinging sippy cups at my knees. I could wait. I could collect. And when I moved my queen across the board, Brett wouldn't even know we were playing. Not yet. You can tell when tenants are unhappy, especially when you see them more often outside their home than in it. Smoking on porches. Waiting for food delivery because the stove's busted. Checking the mailbox with that same defeated posture I used to have after work, hoping for a check, dreading a bill. That's what started happening at my old duplex. Every couple weeks, I'd spot a new tenant loitering near the steps when I passed by on my mail route. Different faces. Same looks. At first, I figured maybe they were just young or new to renting, learning the hard way that Craigslist landlords sometimes come with missing drywall and broken promises. But then I started hearing stories. And not just whispers. The first came from a guy named Doug. Tall, balding, looked like he'd once been athletic but now ran on caffeine and irritation. He flagged me down one morning, still wearing pajama pants, eyes like he hadn't slept in a week. "You used to live here, right?" he asked, nodding toward the duplex. I hesitated. Technically not supposed to engage, but I nodded. He exhaled like I just confirmed a conspiracy theory. You ever have mold under the sink? I blinked. No. He pointed toward the unit with a twitchy jab of his thumb. I've got black mold growing out of the cabinet like it's trying to vote. Brett keeps saying it's just discoloration. I sent him pictures. You know what he replied? Looks fine to me. He pulled out his phone. Sure enough, green fuzz colonizing the corners of his kitchen like a science fair gone rogue. I kept my face neutral, but inside, I was cackling. A week later, another tenant, Tara, single mom with a toddler always sticky with juice, caught me while wrestling her stroller down the steps. You used to be in 41B, right? She asked. There it was again. She leaned in, low voice. Did you have issues with the water pressure? The ceiling? No, not really. She gritted her teeth. I moved in last month. Week 2, the bathroom flooded. Brett said it was a historical issue, and not his fault. Historical issue. I asked him why it wasn't on the lease, and he said I should have asked more questions. Then she looked at me with that tired, knowing look people get when they realize they've been played. You know he doubled the rent since you left, right? Oh, I knew. But I didn't say that. I just gave a little shake of the head. Like I was disappointed but not surprised. Because that's how you get people to keep talking. Stay neutral. Stay useful. Over the next month, I heard more. One guy said Brett promised a new AC unit that never came. Another mentioned that the front door lock jammed and Brett told him to just wiggle it a bit. One woman said she hadn't had hot water for 3 days and Brett sent her a link to a YouTube tutorial. The best part? These people didn't know each other. Not yet. But I knew how to fix that. I made a burner Gmail and started sending anonymous tips. Subject line: others in your building might be having similar issues. Talk to them. I never said who I was. Never mentioned my old unit. Just planted seeds. And they started to sprout. I saw Tara talking to Doug on the porch one evening. A week later, a Facebook post popped up in a local renters group. Anyone else renting from a guy named Brett L? With major maintenance issues? The comments? Glorious. One after another. Stories. Photos. Even a guy from across town with a leaky roof and the same historical issue line. Brett wasn't just a lazy landlord, he was consistent. And dumb enough to use the same excuses like they came preloaded on his phone. I stayed quiet, watched, took notes, because the louder the tenants got, the more people would listen. And when the time came to raise hell, I'd make sure Brett was the one left scrambling to fix a mess he thought no one noticed. Let's just say the mail wasn't the only thing I was delivering anymore. It's funny how long a broken step can go unfixed, until the right person notices it. I'd walked up those stairs at 41B 1,000 times. I knew every creak, every uneven plank. After Brett took over, the place started aging in dog years. Paint peeled faster, gutters sagged lower, siding faded from neutral beige to something closer to sad Band-Aid. And Brett? He didn't care. As long as the checks cleared, the place could collapse inward like a dying star and he'd still call it charming. But the city cares, especially if you know who in the city to talk to. Enter Robert. I'd known Robert since the post office chili cook-off of 2017. He worked code enforcement, old school guy with a clipboard and a temper problem when it came to people cutting corners on inspections. Back then, we'd bonded over a shared hatred of turkey chili and people who think duct tape is a plumbing solution. I caught him at the diner one morning, pretending not to watch the waitress refill his coffee for the 4th time. Hey, Robert, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. Got a minute? He narrowed his eyes. Depends. Is this about your landlord again? I smiled. Ex-landlord. And no, not mine. Just a property I used to live in. Thought you might want to check it out. He groaned. If this is some neighbor beef, it's not. Think of it as a professional curiosity. I handed him a plain manila envelope. Inside were 6 color photos, all time-stamped. Missing railing. Exposed wires under the porch light. Downspout detached and draining straight into the crawl space. A trash can overflowing with construction debris, plastic pipes, insulation, some chunks of drywall. And best of all, a shot of a door frame so warped you could see daylight through the hinge. Robert stared for a while, then sipped his coffee. You took these? Yup. From where? The sidewalk. Convenient angle. I shrugged. He flipped to the last page, a spreadsheet I'd made listing known tenants, rental prices, courtesy of their angry Facebook posts, and complaints I'd overheard on my route. Nothing explicit. Just enough to sketch the outline of a place badly in need of attention. And one man cashing checks while ignoring his obligations. Robert whistled. You know, if this stuff checks out, it violates Code Section 13-7-603, Section 13-21-101, and probably a half-dozen others. He tapped the paper. You filing this officially? I leaned back. Nah, just a tip from a concerned citizen. He smiled. The real kind. The kind that says, I've been waiting for someone to give me a reason to do my job with gusto. Consider it looked into. By the following week, Brett's duplex had a bright orange notice taped to the meter box. Preliminary code enforcement review, do not remove. 2 days later, a white city car pulled up while I was delivering mail across the street. A woman with a clipboard and phone camera walked the property, taking notes. I watched her jiggle the fence gate, then jot something down with a frown. That night, I logged into my burner Gmail and saw a post in the renters group. Anyone else's landlord suddenly getting city inspections? The replies were a mix of panic, confusion, and for those who recognized Brett's name, glee. He didn't post anything. But the next day, the junk mail for Brett Langford suddenly stopped arriving. I guess he'd finally set up a forwarding address. Too little, too late. Because it wasn't just the city I was nudging into motion. I had a bigger fish in my crosshairs. And the IRS? They don't need warped door frames to take a man down. They just need paperwork. And Brett was practically mailing it to me. Brett had a problem, his tenants were starting to talk. I had a solution, make sure everyone listened. There's an art to whisper campaigns. You don't shout. You don't make it obvious. You just plant the seed, water it once, and let the sun of other people's frustration do the rest. It works best when you already know the dirt. And brother, I knew enough to landscape a damn garden. But I wasn't stupid. I had no intention of marching around with signs or blasting Brett's name from a megaphone. That gets you sued or worse, ignored. No, I kept it anonymous. Careful. Tactical. First, I created a throwaway Reddit account and joined the local housing subreddit. Every college town has one, ours is filled with rants, rental nightmares, and the occasional post asking what's a safe area for students with cats? The minute I posted anyone else dealing with a landlord who ignores mold issues and lies about renovations, it lit up like a 4th of July sparkler. Someone replied within 10 minutes, are you talking about Brett Langford? That guy's a walking code violation. Another added, I live at one of his places, he raised our rent $400 and didn't even fix the heater. My roommate had to buy a space heater off Facebook. By the end of the night, the thread had 43 comments. I never confirmed Brett's name, but I didn't need to. Others did that work for me. Then I moved to Facebook. I didn't post under my name, obviously. But local groups are full of potential tenants and, more importantly, landlords watching each other. I messaged the admins of 2 groups and dropped a little tidbit. Just a heads up, someone's renting units without up-to-date inspections and maybe dodging taxes. Not naming names, but if you're a landlord doing things right, you're probably paying for this guy's shortcuts. Admins love drama that makes them look responsible. Within 2 days, both posted general warnings about landlords exploiting tenants, encouraging renters to report issues directly to the city. Meanwhile, I was feeding screenshots and small reports, tenant posts, photos of violations, even Zillow listings to a housing advocate I knew from a previous tenant dispute years ago. Name's Evelyn. She runs a blog that calls out bad landlords in town. Writes everything in this calm, cutting tone that somehow feels worse than yelling. I sent her a folder of files labeled public record, suggested story material. She didn't reply. Just published a piece a week later titled, When Landlords Exploit, Tenants Pay, One Investor's Pattern of Neglect. She never named Brett. She didn't have to. The timeline, photos, and property descriptions were a perfect match. The final paragraph was a gut punch. This isn't about one bad landlord. It's about what happens when greed outweighs responsibility and tenants are expected to carry the burden in silence. The tenants didn't stay silent after that. Doug, the guy with the mold, shared the article on his Facebook with a caption that just said 41B. Every word. Spread it. Tara commented with photos of her leaking ceiling. Someone else started a Google Doc for people to submit issues. By the time I checked it a week later, it had 12 entries. One of them wrote, "He promised me I'd be the only tenant with a dog." There are 4. I stepped in shit twice. And Brett? I imagine he was still blissfully clueless. Still collecting checks. Still thinking that he could slap on some paint and manage his empire through text messages and Venmo receipts. But that empire was getting cracks. From the inside. And the IRS? They were about to find out just how shaky those walls really were. I mailed the letter on a Tuesday. No fanfare. No ticking clock or cinematic music. Just me, a stamped envelope, and a little itch in the back of my neck that felt suspiciously like justice. Inside that envelope? A quiet masterpiece of documentation. It had taken me 3 months to compile. I'd studied Brett's rental empire the way some people study for the bar exam, minus the whiskey plus the rage. Every address he owned was listed, 4 if you counted the one he was hiding behind a shell LLC registered in his cousin's name, easy to trace when the same cousin posted, "Excited to go into biz with Brett," on Facebook. I included screenshots of his Zillow and Facebook marketplace listings, each with timestamps and price hikes that would make a hedge fund manager blush. Rent payments in cash or Venmo, no receipts. A few tenants mentioned they'd never signed formal leases, just agreements via text. That part was key, because while evictions and black mold don't interest the IRS, undeclared rental income and unreported Venmo business transactions, that's a different sermon. I cross-referenced tax records, public info, thank you very much, with rental income estimates based on his own posts. He'd filed Schedule E forms for 2 properties last year and conveniently left out the other 2. I flagged it all in plain, boring, polite IRS language. I believe the taxpayer is underreporting income from at least 2 additional rental properties. Income appears to exceed what was declared on prior year tax forms. Relevant documentation enclosed. I signed it anonymously. I'm not a martyr. Then I walked it over to the post office on my day off, no uniform, no trail, and watched it drop into the blue collection bin with a thunk that echoed louder than it should have. The funny thing is, I didn't feel anything right away. Not joy. Not satisfaction. Just stillness. That lasted about a week. Because karma? Sometimes she likes to send a confirmation email. I was on my route when I passed Brett's duplex again, 41B, the stage where it all began, and saw something new, a man in a navy windbreaker taking photos of the exterior. Not a tenant. No clipboard. Just calm, methodical movements and a badge clipped to his belt that said Treasury Department. I kept walking, heart-thudding, doing my best impression of a mail carrier minding his business. But inside, I felt fireworks going off. A few days later, I heard from Tara again. She flagged me down while I was sliding envelopes into her battered mailbox. "Hey," she said, lowering her voice. "Did you hear?" I played dumb. "About what?" "Brett's freaking out," said someone reported him. He sent out this long text about how everyone's gonna pay if people start poking around where they don't belong. Then get this, he offered me $150 off next month's rent if I signed a tenant satisfaction form. I blinked. "Did you?" She laughed. "Hell no." I forwarded it to the housing blog lady. Good girl. The cherry on top? That same day, I saw Brett himself for the first time in over a month. He was pacing outside the unit, phone glued to his ear, shirt untucked, hair slicked back with desperation sweat. He wasn't smiling. Not even close. He looked like a man trying to hold sand in a colander. I paused at the stop sign down the street, just long enough to catch one clear sentence from his conversation. "No, I didn't think I had to report all of it. That's not how this works." "Oh, Brett, that's exactly how this works. And we weren't even at the good part yet. You ever watch a man unravel in real time? It's not like the movies, no dramatic music or single perfect tear. It's messier. Slower. A little more pathetic." That was Brett. Over the next few weeks, I saw him spiral in a way only someone who thought the rules didn't apply to him could. You know the type. They've coasted through life on charm, luck, and just enough plausible deniability to dodge accountability. But once consequences show up, they fall apart like a cake in a rainstorm. First came the cars. For months, the driveway at 41B had been a parade of Subaru hatchbacks and gently used hybrids, tenants, delivery drivers, the occasional handyman. Then it changed. A dull gray sedan with tinted windows showed up 2, sometimes 3 times a week. The same man sat inside, always in a tie, always with a tablet in hand. IRS? City assessor? Could have been both. Either way, Brett started parking 2 streets over. Like that'd throw anyone off the scent. Then came the real sign things were breaking. Silence. Doug, Tara, even the guy who lived above the unit with the bad AC, no one heard from Brett anymore. No maintenance visits. No replies to texts. One tenant told me Brett had asked to be paid in cash until the audit blows over. And when they refused, he sent some passive-aggressive text about loyalty. Tenant group chats exploded. One posted a screenshot of Brett threatening to evict them. Once the heat dies down. Another shared a Venmo request labeled back rent surcharge, miscellaneous tax comp. I don't even know what that's supposed to mean, but it definitely wasn't legal. Then, like Divine Comedy, someone posted a photo in the Facebook group. For sale by owner, investor special. Unique multi-unit property W/minor repair needs. Motivated seller. He was trying to sell the duplex. I laughed out loud when I saw that one. Minor repair needs was code for, please take this mold-ridden disaster off my hands before the city finds me into oblivion. And the city? Oh, they were just getting started. Robert, the code enforcement guy, called in a formal citation. Not just one property. 3. He didn't tell me the details, but I heard through the grapevine that Brett had ignored 2 official letters and missed a compliance deadline. Apparently, he tried to blame an intern for losing the notices. Brett didn't have an intern. At that point, I figured he'd go quiet, sell the place, try to move out of town and start over. I would have been fine with that. But then he did something even better. One of his tenants, Jessica, a soft-spoken woman with 2 kids and a part-time job at the library, filed a small claims suit against him. Said he kept her security deposit and never fixed the electrical system after promising he would. She had texts, photos, emails, and a timeline worthy of a Netflix docuseries. And the kicker? I was called as a witness. Not in court, no need. Just a written statement. I kept it simple, factual, and dry. Explained how long I'd lived there, what condition the place was in, what I'd witnessed on the route, and included a few photo dates from my own archive. I never even had to testify. The judge ruled in Jessica's favor. Brett was fined, forced to return her deposit with interest. And once that ruling was public, it was like blood in the water. 2 more suits followed. Not criminal, but enough to stain his record. One tenant filed a formal complaint with the Tennessee Department of Revenue. And through all this I watched. Not gloating, not rubbing it in. Just observing as the man who'd smirked at my eviction slowly drowned in the very paperwork he thought nobody read. And somewhere, in the back of my dusty little sublet room, I smiled. Because the house that Brett built, it wasn't falling. It had already collapsed. 3 weeks after Brett's last tenant moved out, the duplex stood empty. The investor special sign in the yard had faded from white to yellow, corners curled like dead leaves. Nobody came to view the place anymore. It sat there like a sunken ship in a quiet sea. Leaning slightly, windows smudged, that warped front step still tilting just enough to roll an ankle if you weren't careful. I passed it on my route every day. No tenants, no trash bins, no Brett. Just silence. Glorious, overdue silence. I figured that was the end of it. And honestly, I was okay with that. He'd lost his tenants, his rental income, and his shot at playing Monopoly with other people's homes. The IRS investigation was still crawling along. Those things take time, but the damage was done. His name was garbage in every housing forum from here to Knoxville. Contractors wouldn't touch his properties. One of the plumbing companies reportedly started charging him double. But one morning in early spring, a new envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name neatly typed. I opened it at the kitchen counter of my still cramped sublet. The roommates were gone. Spring break, or maybe they'd finally dropped out. And the house was quiet for once. I unfolded the letter slowly, expecting a cease and desist, or some thinly veiled legal threat. It wasn't that. It was from the City Housing Board. Not a form letter, not a notice. A real, typed message. 2 paragraphs long, on clean white paper that somehow still smelled faintly like old toner and justice. Mr. Carter, we want to thank you for your efforts in bringing forward concerns related to local rental safety and housing practices. Your documentation and initiative contributed to the identification of multiple code violations and unethical leasing behavior. We are currently reviewing policy adjustments based on several reports, including yours. Please know your voice had impact, not just on one property but across the system. Sincerely, Rachel G. Nelson, Director of Housing Affairs, Rutherford County. I read it 3 times. Sat back, read it again. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't make me rich. But it was proof. Proof that I hadn't just wasted my energy on some petty vendetta. Proof that what Brett did mattered and that someone was finally holding people like him accountable. Even if just a little. I put the letter down and looked around my shoebox room. It was still a dump, but it felt different now. Lighter. And you know what? A week later, I applied for a better place. Same town, little further out, modest rent. Duplex again. Quiet street, real porch, actual landlord with a business card and everything. When I signed the lease, I asked the new landlord if he knew about Brett Langford. He chuckled. Only what not to do. I smiled and nodded. Didn't say a word. Because some stories don't need retelling. They just need to end. And Brett's was over.